Welcome to the year 2000. Websites take 5 minutes to load on your dial-up internet. Your phone provider is charging you for every text you send on your indestructible Nokia, and you have a binder full of your favorite game CDs next to your beige PC tower. Little do you know that this year is about to become one of the most formative years in gaming history. Today, I want to talk about some of the juggernaut video games that launched in the year 2000, some of which established entire genres of games that still dominate the market today. And why not begin with one of the heaviest hitters in all of gaming, Counter-Strike. The competitive tactical FPS that we all know had actually been gaining popularity as a Half-Life mod before its official standalone release in 2000, which launched it into the competitive gaming stratosphere. It wasn't just a competitive FPS when it launched, it became the competitive FPS practically overnight, by which the new elite gamer standards were now measured. Few times in gaming history have I seen markets shift so quickly, but this was literally the popularization of the tactical FPS in under a year. No more jump pads and rocket launchers. The arena shooter had just been upstaged, and players would later realize that they were never going back. Counter-Strike's bomb defusal and round-based economy design was simple yet deep. And the key to its success over its many years of dominance has been to refine what's made the game special instead of changing it up to keep up with trends. 24 years later, you can still load up those classic maps you love and op somebody through double doors on Dust 2. Truly wild to think about. And I don't think I'm being hyperbolic in saying that basically every tactical FPS made today has at least some of its inspiration rooted in Counter-Strike, whether the devs know it or not. This game set the standard and everything has learned from it. Now, the next juggernaut title to launch in the year 2000 didn't technically invent a new genre of game, but it certainly defined that new standard of what could be achieved, and some may argue that it's never been matched. That game is Diablo 2. Old school Blizzard fanboys will remember that title being drenched in development drama and delays. Many feared that Diablo 2 sticking to a 2D based graphics style would hold it back in a world that was quickly transitioning into 3D graphics engines. But Blizzard squashed those concerns with beautifully rendered artwork, a musical score that still haunts my dreams, and some of the best endgame grinding we've ever seen. With incredibly rare items needed to make specific builds work, players could easily sink thousands of hours into min-maxing their builds, and the time spent working on your character became immediately clear in game, with some players turning into mere demigods. Diablo 2 was breaking mouses and flaring carpal tunnel around the world. I remember chatting with friends at school about character builds, new levels for months and months and months. Even going to Diablo 2 LAN parties to amp up the experience. The frantic pace and pure insanity that could be achieved with the gameplay felt completely new to players of that genre. Even comparing it to the original Diablo, which was slow and clunky by comparison, Diablo 2 felt like a completely different experience. Same isometric view and dark demonic stylings, but the pacing and character builds made it a nearly incomparable experience. The game became an icon for what the action RPG is, and just about every action RPG I play today feels kind of like an iteration of Diablo 2 to me. Now, financially, the next game launched in 2000 probably generated more revenue than all the other titles on this list combined, and that is The Sims. Love it or hate it, just about everyone who gamed in the year 2000 probably played this completely original concept for a video game. Maxis, the legendary studio known for all the Sims games, especially SimCity, had just created one of the biggest gaming cash cows in history by creating an entirely new audience of gamers. Developing your own nuclear family, customizing your characters, building relationships, managing your household. These were things that weren't readily available to the gaming audience before The Sims. It was brand new territory and an immediate sensation all over the world. And despite the Maxis studio later shutting down due to a series of failures, Electronic Arts has taken full control of The Sims, with The Sims 4 having just released its 18th expansion pack. And the reviews are favorable. 24 years later, and this franchise is still raking it in. Now, the next masterpiece to launch in the year 2000 opened the concept of dynamic role-playing game to the FPS crowd of all people. And that game was Deus Ex, which I know we're going to argue about the pronunciation. Have it out in the comments, guys. That's the best I can do. Now, when this game launched, I literally witnessed the power of word-of-mouth marketing. Everybody was talking about how cool this game was, what different kinds of endings they could get, how their experience was different from other players, or how they completed missions in their own way. It was such a unique gaming experience that gave players more agency than any title I had seen before it. You play as an operative that works for a futuristic agency in sort of a cyberpunk dystopian future that's been enhanced by cybernetic upgrades. Certainly some parallels to Cyberpunk 2077. As a player, you could completely craft your playstyle around what you specifically liked, but to an extent that few gamers had seen before, and honestly some may have still never seen. You could go almost completely passive in the game with skill sets for hacking and sneaking versus a full combat skill set to gun your way through the opposition. And every choice you made had consequences later on, no matter how small it seemed. If you went into the women's bathroom at your HQ, you would get reprimanded for it later.
By the way, Denton, stay out of the ladies' restroom.
Trying to get into a secure building, you can sneak in, bribe your way in, or even agree to kill an employee's boss to gain admission. Oh, and if you don't kill the boss, then that employee turns up dead later on in the level. Every single gameplay and dialogue choice you made feels like it was going to affect the next decision, level, experience in some way or another. Now today, there are more games that offer similar levels of creative problem solving and player agency, but few that go quite as deep. Deus Ex is still an impressive experience today, maybe not graphically, but certainly within player agency. And getting to play this game in the year 2000 was nothing short of groundbreaking, and it showed the world the power of player agency. It also kind of secretly introduced an entire generation of gamers to the idea of role-playing games like D&D without them even realizing it. Now, speaking of player agency in Dungeons & Dragons, Baldur's Gate 2 also launched in the year 2000. But just like its sequel, when Baldur's Gate 2 launched, it set a new standard for role-playing games. Built on the foundation of the D&D rule set, it expanded the gameplay, storytelling, and character customization seen in its predecessor and many games before it. And despite many gamers really enjoying Baldur's Gate 1, it was held back by the experience of the developers and also them having to build an entire game engine from the ground up. With the sequel, they are able to focus on making smaller technical improvements to the engine so that they could spend way more effort addressing the mountain of feedback that they got from diehard fans. When gamers talk about developers listening to the community, Baldur's Gate 2 is a shining example of how it can pay off. And like Deus Ex, what really made Baldur's Gate 2 stand out was its commitment to player agency and real-time combat. Most games of this era relied on linear progression and more rigid interactions to push the story forward. Heck, most games today also do this because of the complexity of creating a dynamic narrative. But Baldur's Gate 2 gave you choices with rich consequences whenever possible. You had full control over your entire party, the levels had tons of secrets and intricate layouts, quests would often branch out into multiple side quests with their own narratives and gameplay. And all of this worked in service of a masterfully written story with multiple endings depending on how you played. Plus, the gameplay wasn't the usual text prompt-based slogfest of traditional turn-based combat. Its real-time with pause combat system mixed things up and created a faster, more enjoyable pacing, allowing it to further break the mold of the classic RPG adventures. Now, honestly, the year 2000 was just spoiling gamers with RPG adventure games. Pretty much any style you wanted, with The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask also launching and defying odds by being an incredible Zelda game. 2 years prior, Nintendo released The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, a game that was universally celebrated for its masterful transition of the 2D Zelda world into a 3D environment with the N64 console. It's since been celebrated as one of Nintendo's greatest of all time video games. How the heck is Nintendo supposed to follow that? Nintendo's original plan was to remake the Ocarina of Time for the 64DD, a floppy disk add-on for the N64. But the project's lead got bored of it, and he was challenged by Shigeru Miyamoto to make a new game in less than a year. This resulted in the team crafting a sequel to Ocarina of Time in 15 months that reused the game's original assets and engine with some technical improvements. The small team of developers tasked with making the game suffered extreme crunch, but despite the harsh conditions and deadlines, Majora's Mask became a truly unique and amazing addition to the franchise. It was praised for its darker tone and more adult themes. It had deeper character depth, a world that felt more alive, side quests that offered a lot more gameplay than its predecessor, and it had a cool 3-day cycle mechanic which was very new for the franchise. On paper, when factoring in all of the production elements for this game, it should have been a disaster, but somehow it became a title so good that many would argue it was better when compared to Ocarina of Time. Gamers were just straight up spoiled with getting two insanely good Zelda games back to back. Now, moving beyond the masterclass of RPGs that launched in 2000, we get to talk about a game that is now legendary, having recently received a highly praised remaster many years later, and that game is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Now, Pro Skater 1 was pretty much an instant classic. It propelled skateboarding into the mainstream, got a generation of kids into the band Goldfinger, and took Tony Hawk's career out of the halfpipe and into the limelight for everyone to see. And while the original game was a fantastic title that broke new ground for sports action titles like being good for a change, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is what gave the franchise the iconic trick combos that has become so well known for. This game introduced manuals that let you string together essentially endless trick combos. In the first game, once you landed a trick on the ground, your combo was basically over. But with this seemingly simple addition of the manual, the insane scoring potential of extending combos became a staple of the franchise. The game also introduced other essential elements like creating your skater and online multiplayer. It was such a great game and a refinement of the original formula that it became a template not just for sequels but for many other skating and sports games like SSX snowboarding games, Jet Set Radio, Skate, and countless others. Now, there were plenty of other great titles that launched this year, but these are the top ones in my mind, and really the year 2000 or the turn of the century was kind of like a renaissance for gaming. I'd be curious to know your experiences with these titles in the comments section, and also if you think there was another year in gaming that was even more impressive than this one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop me a like, subscribe for more content like it, and ding that notification bell to beat the YouTube algorithm with me. Up next, check out some of the best boomer shooters ever made. This is a fantastic genre that I think is just going to stick around till the end of time. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.